This is Caregiver Storyteller, produced by CaringKind, the heart of Alzheimer's caregiving. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Storyteller, a storytelling podcast about Alzheimer's and dementia caregiving. I'm Dr. Ann Kenny, and I'll be interviewing caregivers to get their stories about Alzheimer's and dementia caregiving. Occasionally, I'll also interview authors, advocates, researchers, healthcare professionals, and people with Alzheimer's and dementia to hear their stories too. So are you ready? Here we go. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Concetta Tomaino to our podcast today, to the Caregiver Storyteller. I'm going to do a quick, brief introduction, but mostly I want Dr. Tomaino to tell you about herself. Dr. Tomaino is the Executive Director and co-founder of the Institute for Music and Neurologic Function. She's internationally known for her research in clinical applications of music and neurological rehab, and she's the author of Music Has Power in Senior Wellness and Healthcare. But I think we should just call it Music Has Power. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Thank you for coming on to the
My
podcast
pleasure.
today. I can't wait to hear everything you say. I'm so thrilled that you're here and willing to share your story with the people at Caregiver Storyteller. So if I could start, because it is a storyteller podcast, can you tell us the story of how you got started in this and why it's so important to you?
Sure. Well, I've always, I think even growing up, my interests have always been science and music. I know as a little kid, my mom used to tell me that I would make up songs. I was like making music even before I knew what I was doing. And then I always aspired to be a medical doctor. And even from a very early age, I would follow our family doctor around. I'd have my little doctor's kit. And so everything I did as I was growing up was related to science and studying science. But I took accordion lessons when I was 10 years old. I still play it. And then in high school, picked up the trumpet. And um, when I went to college, it was as a pre-med student, but I wanted to take trumpet lessons and ended up having to major in music to take trumpet lessons with the teacher I wanted. And so I double majored in sciences and music. And I'm telling the story because it wasn't until my junior year that I found out about a field called music therapy. And I said, my goodness, can I do this? And somehow integrate science and health and music. I'm not a very in your face type of trumpet player out would perform. I tend to be a more quiet, laid back type of participant in the music that I play. And so what happened, I ended up going straight on to my master's degree in music therapy at NYU. And I tell this story all the time because it's really what switched my passion about music in the brain and music, especially for people with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, because my internship was at a nursing home, skilled nursing facility in Brooklyn in the 1970s,
Okay, so
when
this is
nobody knew
way
what
before people
Alzheimer's.
were talking about.
Right. And these poor people, were over medicated, had feeding nasal gastric tubes, feeding tubes. Their hands were in mittens and tied to their wheelchairs so they wouldn't take it was a horrible looking place, and I felt terribly for the residents. And my job was basically to play music, to do music programs. And so I was assigned to play on this unit, and people were, screaming and yelling and restless and agitated, and some were totally catatonic and non-responsive. And the nurses were looking at me when I had a guitar at that point, were looking at me and said, "Oh, that's really nice, but don't expect anything because they're really not there and they're not gonna respond. But thank you for coming." But I did play music because in music therapy, we're taught that music has very strong emotional connections and we can even reach, very deep emotions. So I sang an old song that people still know, "Let Me Call You Sweetheart," which for
Mm,
these people in their 90s, back in 1970, this is a
right,
song was written when they were kids. This was
right.
a new song for them. And don't you know, the people who were agitated calmed down, and the people who seemed to be catatonic opened their eyes, and I kept singing and repeated, and half of them started singing the words to the song. And I'm thinking, how is that possible if they have no cognitive ability? How is their brain processing vibrations in the air as a recognizable song? And that
And
was
they're
it. I was
singing.
hooked. I was hooked. I had to find out, like, what is it? Because I knew about the psychology of music and emotions, but nobody, and even then, trying to think of the brain having, you know, the idea of neural networks didn't exist yet.
Right. Kind of
The idea of
yeah.
arousing something that was still there. So what I saw at that moment were people who were still there, who were locked, who were stuck
Right.
and couldn't connect.
And you found that way.
Somehow through a familiar song, we could have a human connection. And that's
Okay.
what started me on this journey. And then in 1980, I had the good fortune of getting a full-time music therapy position at Beth Abraham Hospital, which was a chronic disease hospital in the Bronx, very close to where I grew up. And Dr. Oliver Sacks, who's known for his best-selling books as well as the movie Awakenings, was the attending neurologist there. And he had just witnessed his awakenings with the patients there who had come to life through rhythm and music, but who were otherwise immobilized by a horrible sort of Parkinson's type of neuromuscular disease. So he actually wrote a really sweet. Um, the first week I was there, I got a envelope, into office envelope, with a ripped off piece of loose leaf paper with a magic marker scribbled. Every disease has every disease is a musical problem. Every cure a musical solution. Welcome, Ollie. And so I had to find out who he was, and I found out that this neurologist was interested in music. And because back then, if you were a music therapist, nobody knew what you did. And nobody took you seriously, and everybody called you the music lady because obviously it was just music for music's sake and nothing else. But he was a medical doctor who was really curious about how
And thought that the solution was music.
yeah, and so we became best friends. We worked together for 35 years and would literally spend evenings at his house trying to figure out what this was. Going back to books that he had in his library. In the early 80s, we tried to see if some of the neuroscientists who were just starting to study auditory perception could help us. And they said, well, music is so complex that you can't isolate exactly what's turning on these individuals. Music is vibration, it's frequency of pitch, it's those pitches put together to make a melody. There's the emotional connection to all the associations we have, and then the memories that we associate. So there's so many levels of brain activity. But that's what we've learned over the years is that multiplicity of music perception, of the way the brain organizes itself so we can put these pieces together to make sense of a beautiful song and have a personal connection to it, is a very dynamic process, but also speaks to the resilience of music and why it's so long lasting. Even when somebody starts losing speech or losing other types of cognitive ability, if they've had a life with music in it, those connections and those associations and those feelings are so hardwired into the construct of their memory, to those deep-seated, rooted, long-term memories, that we can still access them, and they could still access them through familiar music, through music that has autobiographical meaning to them.
That's one. And so then if you can unlock that, then family members can unlock that.
Absolutely.
And what we all want is to have connection for as many minutes, for as many moments as we can. And that's why I think cognitive loss is so hard for people, because you feel that loss of connection. Both the person living with the cognitive loss and the family member.
And that's one of the reasons why, I've been sharing information for so long. I mean, I've been a music therapist now for over 45 years, and trying to bring best practices. What do we know about how and why music works? So everybody, even before they have a diagnosis, can you make sure that music is part of their life, whether it's dancing or playing a musical instrument, because there's so much brain activity and the integration of movement and um, different really robust levels of cognitive activity, that you actually develop like a cognitive reserve, because
Mm-hmm.
you have these interconnected networks, that hopefully that if something starts going wrong in one area, you still have enough interconnections. And I'll give a good example of this. When somebody loses their speech because of a stroke, sometimes they can still sing, and it's because the networks for singing and speech are shared.
Yeah.
So even though they may have trouble word finding or putting together a series of words, a string of words, they could sing complete lyrics to songs.
Yeah.
And that may not carry over, but if they're working with a music therapist who uses singing of lyrics as a gateway, as a priming tool to
Mm-hmm.
help reconnect those networks to spoken word, then they start getting access and start speaking again. So
So really
those are the
can be
types.
in
Yes,
rehabilitation even to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the more robust those networks are connected, the more access the person has. It's
Mm.
like a backup system in case something goes wrong.
So we need to all go to karaoke night. We all need
Exactly. Exactly.
we
In
all
fact,
need
it's
to,
yeah,
update our Pandora, our Spotify, and
exactly. In
get
fact,
our playlist for life.
and one of the things I do recommend, it's not been studied. And maybe at CaringKind you do this too, but I recommend that if somebody does start having memory problems and have been diagnosed with early cognitive decline, everybody should have a song
Mm-hmm.
that represents them. So
Mm.
every time they meet the person who has cognitive, that they do their song together,
Mm-hmm.
because then the association of that song with that individual is makes a link. So
What a
if
beautiful practice.
so
Yeah.
if the person can't recognize the face anymore, um, somehow the association of who that person is in their life will have been created and held
And
fast.
solidified at a time when there were more neural networks.
Exactly.
And
And
so
and,
you
and
do it early and often to build that resilience for later.
right, and have those associations there. So even on a very basic level, there's recognition that that person is connected to me, even though I don't recognize them. And I
Mhm.
think for family member and caregiver, having the reassurance that their loved one still recognizes them on some level
Yeah.
is so crucial to
So crucial.
maintaining those connections and relationships. Because
Right.
the Travis, the horror, the difficulty when somebody doesn't recognize somebody and their behavior changes. I mean, it's devastating for anyone
Right. And there's so
to
much grief.
experience that.
Right.
To
So
have
much
those
grief for the person that's
exactly,
doing the care partnering.
exactly. But if there's a way there's moments of connection and expression that they can share, those are golden
Mm.
opportunities.
Yeah. And my mom lived with dementia and she was so musically she was a preschool teacher, so
Uh,
we could do like she loved every little preschool song and she loved Christmas carols and it really did continue to give me a way to connect with her to the very end because they were just such a part of her life and show tunes. I mean, for
sure.
her those were the important ones. But knowing to foster that would have been so much more helpful I mean, to have such a tangible tool. Do you have other
Sure. Well,
strategies?
just you mentioned karaoke. At family get-togethers, instead of sort of putting sometimes people, if they have cognitive loss, they don't feel included, or
Mhm.
they're alienated, not on purpose, but maybe
Right.
just by the matter of having conversations, and somehow they can't fit in, or somebody's talking around them. But if you do karaoke, if you have or or dance as a group, the person with cognitive challenges is included and participates. And it
Nice.
helps normalize and enhance those experiences, so those moments aren't lost.
Okay.
And for the person who has cognitive decline, it's just being connected and feeling that you still have ability to do that. So anytime there's a chance to do music together, or even if you played instruments at one point to still do that, or karaoke so easy these days, you could just turn on a YouTube channel
Yeah.
and you type in, Stevie Wonder karaoke, and everybody could sing, so you don't even have to remember the words.
That's perfect. Because, yeah, many of us don't. But what do you think about adding that rhythm? You had mentioned that Dr. Sachs talked about rhythm. What about
Sure. So for movement, sometimes it's interesting because rhythm obviously is so integrated in music, but it's crucial for speech and communication. In
okay.
fact, there's research that shows that children with language delays actually have poor rhythm perception
Ah,
or poor pattern perception. So because their sensory system of processing patterns of sound isn't fully developed, they can't understand that stream of words that comes out of somebody's mouth as language. It doesn't make sense to them. It's just noise. So,
okay.
so building those building blocks. So rhythm is integral to speech and communication. So,
Mm,
if somebody's having trouble understanding you when you speak, if you break it down into, syllables or very slowly and articulate the words, they could better process what you're saying.
okay.
What tapping and rhythm does is it enhances and excites the motor area of the brain that's fully connected with speech. And so
Okay.
the person who's, if somebody has problems speaking, or they may have some of the motor issues related to speech, dysarthria may, so it's the coordination of all those aspects of speech. If you tap along while you're trying to speak, it better integrates that system.
Okay.
And then for movement issues, if somebody has balance issues, or, older folks sometimes lose the sensation in the bottom of their feet. So
Hmm.
their sense of where the floor is damaged, and they're at risk for faults. They don't feel steady. They really can't feel the ground. But if they walk to music, that's timed to their safe steps.
Okay.
And you could do this with just your watch and figure out what the timing is. Um, but if they walk to music, that integration of moving in time is better enhanced to the point that they have almost like a support system that helps them to move without thinking about it. So they're
Okay.
not overthinking each step. You know that people with cognitive challenges, the more they focus or try to think about doing something, the more it gets in the way of the spontaneity of
Right.
the action.
So just having that musical background, you're
Helps
not
integrate
thinking
the
about it,
movement.
just gives you that scaffolding
Exactly,
in a way.
exactly. So if
So
somebody has trouble walking, or if there's shuffling, putting on a nice rhythmic, and it doesn't have to be a march, it could be a rock and roll song, something with a good steady beat is going to help that person with ambulation.
so maybe care partners can use this at a time when they're trying to get somebody into the shower
Right.
or off
I
to the
talked to the,
bathroom.
I mentioned the story a couple of times because I had a family. The husband was the caregiver to his wife who had Alzheimer's. And she was really stubborn. And, it was so hard to get her out of her chair and, to eat or to go to the bathroom or to take a shower. But they used to love to dance, and they used to go to these swing dances when they were younger all the time. And
Mhm.
so one day, and this was on his own, he said, I'm just going to put on Duke Ellington and see what happens. And she's sitting on the chair and she's like really, stiff and not moving. And he puts on the record and he reaches out a hand. He goes, would you like to dance? And she
Mm,
jumps out of her chair and he starts dancing around the living room, and then he danced her into the bathroom.
mhm.
So things like that really work. Just those little cues, and it's almost like the person needs to be jump started.
Mhm.
Was that
Yep.
that level of inactivity, or
Yeah, that the apathy that can often
exactly.
come with cognitive changes,
Sure.
not the person's fault,
Right.
part of the
And it's not their
disease.
attitude. It's not an
No, it's
attitude
just
thing either, or
right,
stubbornness that some people say. It's
right,
literally that their brain is slow and
right.
it needs to be cranked up a little bit.
Yeah.
And music does that
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
had I had a patient and her husband, and again, he was the primary caregiver, and she was the person living with cognitive loss. And he used music and dance always, every
Mm,
time she was getting restless,
yeah.
he say, "I'll dance her out of it." And,
Yeah,
waiting in a doctor, I mean, waiting in my office for me, I would often walk in and they'd be just dancing around the exam room
that's
waiting
the way
for
to
me to
do it.
show up.
So
And
important.
and she just would be beaming because she'd been moving, and he just looked at her so adoringly, and that connection, I mean, they lived
Did
very
you
well together for so long. Yeah.
did you ever? I don't know because Dr. Sachs had done this with me. After somebody is engaged in music when they're very active, do you find that they're more lucid if you try to do an exam?
Absolutely.
So, because we used to schedule all of his, we used to schedule music therapy or music sessions before more complex neuro assessments because it actually allowed the person to participate better in those assessments.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I can be tired, and if somebody puts on some music and dances with me in the kitchen, I've been re-energized. I mean,
Yeah,
we talk about, like, is it a cup of coffee or is it an afternoon walk? Is it the music or a little dance session with your family member? It
exactly.
works for toddlers, it works for old ladies like me, and it works for
Yeah.
people with cognitive changes.
But
It
you know,
makes
you mentioned
sense,
about
doesn't
top,
it?
it's a generational aspect of music. There's so much that can be shared, regardless of what age somebody in the family is. So another way of connecting generations when a family member may be worried, well, the kids aren't going to feel comfortable with grandma because she doesn't recognize who they are. But making music together is always something
Right.
we could do.
And maracas and tambourines
Yep.
can keep even, a 3-year-old happy,
Oh,
and
for sure. And
yeah.
dancing around the room. Yes.
Yeah, dancing always works.
Right.
Every wedding shows us that, right?
Right.
All right. Any other tips you have for
Oh, well,
I'm
there's
sure you
there's
have a
such
million.
sure, now I mentioned about how easy it is to access karaoke on YouTube.
Mhm.
Everybody has a phone, tablets. There's no reason why people, and if they're not doing it already, don't have a playlist for every time of the day. So there should be a playlist for dancing. There should be a playlist for relaxation. There should be a playlist for reminiscence that's attached to big events in somebody's life. um, there should be a playlist that is just filled with music that your loved one enjoys. So if there are these moments where they get agitated or restless, that playlist will help calm them down and feel safe.
All right.
So there's so much we could do with technology. There's apps available now, and various programs online that make it easier for the caregiver because all they have to do is just open the app and be able to do sing-alongs. So I'm thinking of programs like SingFit. Um, I work with a company and an app called Spirit Tune, which is really for everyday people. It helps with um, it uses music to entrain different emotional states. So if you're
Okay.
anxious and you want to be calm, you just choose that track, and it's all original music, but it's created to have elements of sound that engage the brain in a certain way that either energizes you or helps you feel relaxed. So there's so much there that we can use that's
Would you
very
mind sharing
accessible.
some of those links with us, and we'll put them in the show
Sure.
notes
No,
to help?
absolutely. I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Um, these are great suggestions. Your so tell me a little bit more about your book,
Okay.
Music is Power, so that people know that there's a resource for them to go to get many, many more tips, many
Sure. Well,
and the understanding behind them.
so the book is meant for everyday people. It's not a textbook. It's written so everybody can find ways of using music in their lives for their health, but also if they're caring for somebody. Uh, the book also has and the book is available on Amazon and through the publisher, which is Jessica Kingsley. And if you go to our website, which is IMNF, there is a link where you can get the book right away. So with an accompaniment to the book is a resource page on our website that's private, but you gain access to it when you get the book. And there's there's videos and how-to and activities. If somebody's a therapeutic recreation specialist, they may want to, use the book and use those recommendations too. But it's accessible to everybody
Yeah.
who wants to. And then just recently, we launched a training program, a certificate program. We have some caregivers who, volunteer at their local nursing home and wanted to have more tools. So it's a 9-course certificate. I believe it takes, anywhere, it's probably like 7, 8 hours long, but you can do it over time. It's online. And little tidbits about, how to use drumming or how to use singing. There's also a chapter on music with speech and music with stroke rehabilitation, so things like that. Or people just take elements of the book if they're interested in something specifically. And
And
we found some
and
great
it's
feedback
easy to
because
read. It's
it's
so
meant to
informative.
takeaways.
I can highly recommend it. I've loved reading it, and
Thank you.
yeah. And you're right, for people who are, you don't have to just read it. The links off to the videos is great, and the strategies. So
Great. Thank you. Good.
yeah. And the stories. I mean, your book is full of stories, which is another great way to make that connection and another great way to learn. You filled it with beautiful. They're not testimonials. They're stories of people who have used music to make their lives better.
Yeah, thanks.
And not that it. And I love that there are recommendations for when something is too complex, how to get access to a music therapist.
Right. That's the important thing too. Especially now with technology, we can work with people via Zoom. I've seen people all over the world via Zoom, even in Israel and Peru, and it doesn't matter. So people can learn about that also through our website, but they should check. There's a certification board for music therapists and the American Music Therapy Association that do have directories on their websites. So if somebody's living in town, they can check to see also if the university in their town has a music therapy program, because chances are then there's clinicians living in that area
Right.
as well. But we're available to help people through Zoom if they can't find anybody.
And that's so wonderful. If somebody when someone reads your book and they start using music in their own way, in their own lives, and in the lives of the people they're supporting, and that they see the magic that happens, and then they know that this is a strategy that will be powerful for them. There will be circumstances that it it would be nice to have that specialist. I mean,
Right.
of course we don't need it every day all the time, but to be able to go to somebody who understands and and has that expertise and the nuance, and you
Right.
can get them over to a new level of improvement.
Sure.
And that,
And
I'm
also,
sorry.
music therapists are trained the master's level music therapists are trained to do psychotherapy with music. A lot of music therapy is a psychotherapeutic model. And so even for people when they get to the point that they can express themselves and can't benefit from verbal therapy, music therapists do work on deep fears and emotions and depression and issues like that non-verbally through
Mhm.
music expression. Isn't it? So sometimes it's not just about singing the songs or dancing. Music therapy is really using the aspects of music to reach deep down and to
And
help the
open you
person
up.
and
Yeah,
open up and help and provide a safety net in a way that allows the person to have a better quality of life. And it
that's
could be with couples too, if this is something that they want to experience together.
okay. That is that. Do you have an example of that with people with cognitive loss and
I'll give you a
their
good
care
example.
partners? Yeah.
Yeah, we had a caregiver group once, and the husband was taking care of his wife and came in every day to take care of her. And in the caregiver, and she's sitting right next to him, and she was nonverbal. And he said, it's really shame. And in the group, we sing songs and all this kind of stuff. And he says, I'm really upset because I wish she knew who I was, or I wish there was like a sign that she recognized me. And and the therapist who was running the session had everything on video. And she said, well, you have to see your wife when you were singing that song. And he goes, what do you mean? And she said she was looking at you the whole time and smiling. And at that moment, he realized that she still knew who he was. And so that changed his whole perspective, in caring for her. He didn't just talk around, he didn't feel like he was just doing things to her and not her appreciating who he was. But that was
He
still,
sang to her.
yeah, yeah.
And
And he
looked at
did.
me.
And he actually did. From then on, he was more conscious of
Yeah.
how he engaged with music with her.
That's so wonderful. Connie, these stories are wonderful.
Oh, thank
Is
you.
there anything you would leave my group with, to words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would just start making your list, start thinking of those songs, start thinking of ways you can connect and
Okay.
stay connected.
Okay.
Use
So
it.
the autobiographical is important, that
Yeah.
these are songs that connect to you or to your family member.
And then music for different things. So music to move to, and music to relax to, and music to sleep to, music to connect with. So that's their homework.
Curate it so it fits your.
And it's easy. You have it on your phone wherever you go.
We have these computers in our pockets.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing with us.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure reading your book. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. And I can't thank you enough for the world, for all the work you've done, combining that music and that love of science and moving us into this place where we understand why people wake up. And we know that it's crucial and needed, and it's not a mystery. I mean, there's still mysteries, but it's not the mystery it was in 1970, right?
That's for sure. And
Yeah.
and that's been wonderful for me to see how far we've come.
And I want to thank you for being the pioneer in that and getting us here. I mean, you really have done an incredible job of blending the music and the science with keeping the music primary up there with the science. Thank you. Thank you for from me to, and all of us out here, to you for the work you've done, and making music such a big part of rehabilitation and recovery and just connection.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to share your story, go to caringkindnyc.org/podcast. Maybe we'll use your story on the show. We'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave some glowing feedback. We love positive reinforcement. I'm Dr. Ann Kenny, and you're listening to Caregiver Storyteller, produced by CaringKind,